Are you high? You're high right now.
Me?
Yeah.
No.
That's a yes.
I'm sober.
I don't believe it.
I'm sober as a bird.
Really? You clean the whole house sober? Okay, so this episode is going to be all about seed oils. Seed oils are a very controversial topic nowadays, and I think the reason is that they are in pretty much all food you consume at any restaurant, and in most of the homes around America, it is the oil that is used. For seed oils, I'm referring to industrial seed oils. So we're talking soybean oil is the most common one, canola oil, I'm talking sunflower seed oil, safflower oil. These are industrial seed oils that are very commonly used, and we're being told to use those and not use coconut oil, butter, olive oil, animal fat, stuff like that. So we're going to get into how did seed oils get so popular, because they weren't used for most of human history. And we're going to get into the negative health effects of seed oils, which are often refuted by these mainstream dietitians that say seed oils are good because they reduce cholesterol. We're going to get into that, and we're going to get into why I don't eat seed oils, what I use instead. Let's get into it. What are seed oils? So there are two types of seed oils. One of them is made from pressing the actual seeds, and you get the oil from them, oftentimes in a hydraulic press. So this is mechanical extraction of oils. This is often used for seed and nut oils, like walnut oil, almond oil, hemp seed oil, black seed oil. For the sake of this podcast, we're not going to be discussing those. I don't think those are good to consume massive amounts of, but nobody really consumes large amounts of those oils. They're often used medicinally, and I don't think there's that much issue in consuming a very small amount of those. Very small. I don't mean cooking your food in those on a regular basis. We are going to talk about industrial seed oils, and the reason is that the overconsumption of these seed oils is very pervasive because these are added to our food, our packaged food. Pick up, you've seen me in the grocery store. Pick up any processed food. It's going to have canola oil, soybean oil. All restaurants, 99.9% of restaurants use seed oils. So what are industrial seed oils? Industrial seed oils are the highly processed oils extracted from soybeans, corn, rapeseed, which is the source of canola oil. Yes, it's called rapeseed. I know it's kind of funny. That is what it's called. Cottonseed oil and safflower seeds. So these were introduced to the American diet in the early 1900s, and they didn't really become fully ubiquitous and used everywhere until probably the 30s. So the difference with these seed oils is they are made with industrial-grade machinery and solvent extraction. So this is where they get, you got to think these are seeds. They don't have a lot of oil in these tiny little seeds. So they have to use solvent extracts such as hexane to extract the oil from the seeds. So how did these even get into play? Why did this even start happening? Cottonseed oil was consigned to the status of toxic waste. And then Procter & Gamble came around and they realized that they had all this unwanted cottonseed oil that was traditionally being used to produce soaps. But they realized, hey, maybe there's something else we can do with this. So from there, they figured out using a process called hydrogenation. You've probably heard of hydrogenated fats, which they were able to turn this cottonseed oil into a solid cooking fat. And they thought, wow, maybe we can sell this to Americans as a cooking fat and use all this cottonseed oil that we have. So how do they make these seed oils? First, you got to gather the seeds. So soy, corn, cotton, safflower, rapeseed. And you got to think, you got to know, understand, corn and soy are subsidized by our government, which means your tax dollars, if you work a job right now, are given to corn and soy farmers to produce corn and soy. It's not a great use of tax dollars in my opinion, but that's for another podcast. So then they get these seeds and they heat them to extremely high temperatures, which causes the unsaturated fatty acids in those seeds to oxidize, which create byproducts that are bad for human health. So now you have this sort of oil. It's kind of gross looking, so they have to use a petroleum-based solvent such as hexane to maximize the amount of oil extracted from these seeds. And now you get this weird, smelly oil, and they have to deodorize them because there's an off-putting smell. You would never buy these seed oils if they weren't deodorized. That is a process where they add stuff basically like bleach. This process also produces some trans fats, which we know are harmful to human health. And then they get this oil into this light, neutral oil. They package it in large containers, typically in plastic. And sometimes they add other chemicals like TBHQ, which we'll get into, because these oils would get rancid very quickly if it weren't for all this processing. So it's a heavily processed oil. If you want to know how they traditionally make olive oil, They get the oil out of olives. You can do it with your hands. There's a spoon, this weird looking spoon with a hole in it in Italy, where you'll see people still to this day basically just squishing olives and they get the olive oil from there. That is how you get olive oil. Beef tallow, you have a cow, the fat is right there. Of course, you can render it and make it into more of a, easier product to ship around and it looks better, but you don't need to do these insane processes to get the oil there. So how did they get popular? In the late 1940s, there was a small group of cardiologists who were at the New American Heart Association, and they received a $1.5 million donation from that company, Procter & Gamble, who started to popularize cottonseed oil and figured out, wow, we can sell these seed oils. So they gave them this huge amount of cash. You gotta remember, this is the 1940s. So 1.5 million back then, you can think of it as like 5, 6, 7, 10 million today. They gave them a little good chunk of money. And this gave the American Heart Association funding and sort of a national profile as this group dedicated towards heart health. This was really important because around this time, I think President Eisenhower had a heart attack, and this was a big thing for America. They went, why did our president had a heart attack? We need to find out what is causing heart disease. This is crazy. Heart disease wasn't even that prevalent at the time, but given that our president had a heart attack, this is very important. We wanted to figure out what is causing this. Well, the American Heart Association, funded by Procter & Gamble, now had this scapegoat to look towards. Around that same time, Ancel Keys, who you may have heard of, really bad scientist, introduced his diet lipid hypothesis. So he presented this data that suggested a link between saturated fat and heart disease. We now know, this is well-established knowledge, that Ancel Keys omitted tons of research that did not support his theory and included a tiny bit of research that did support his theory, which is now largely proven wrong. Saturated fat doesn't cause heart disease, neither does dietary cholesterol. So we had these two things going on. Procter & Gamble really wanting to push seed oils, starting the American Heart Association. Ancel Keys doing all this really bad research surrounding saturated fat, clogging your arteries, which we now know is false, but it still is prevalent to this day. People still believe that. So because animal fats are a rich source of dietary saturated fat and cholesterol, they became the object of his criticism. He cited animal fats as unhealthy, and he recommended the consumption of polyunsaturated fatty acid, also known as PUFAs. You might hear people refer to them as PUFAs, polyunsaturated fatty acids. And he basically said, hey, this research I did shows that cholesterol and saturated fat, it clogs your arteries and it causes heart disease. From there, we were basically done. I mean, this is a different time. You got to think the internet wasn't around. People couldn't do their research that they can do today. So America focused on getting heart healthy off of this horrible research, which wasn't true at all. And there was backlash. Traditional tribes and, I remember even my grandma, who's an older Indian woman, she said it was very strange to her that, she was born in 1930. So it was very strange to her that they started to hear that ghee and coconut oil was somehow bad for them. And these are fats they've used for forever. And now they're being told this is killing you. So they were kind of surprised about that because it was known as medicinal, those, ghee and coconut oil, which I think of them as medicinal. I love my healthy fats. And even a restaurant like McDonald's used beef tallow. Their fries were cooked in beef tallow. And after, they were actually one of the last holdouts. They wanted to keep their fries cooked in beef tallow, but with so much pushback, they eventually removed it, and the rest is history. Now 99.9% of restaurants use seed oils to this day. If you go out and you do not, you're not cooking your food at home, if you eat takeout, you are ingesting seed oils. Why? Because doctors say that they lower cholesterol, they lower LDL. There are a lot of issues with seed oils, and here are my main issues with seed oils. Number one, and we're going to cover each of these. Number one, eating industrial seed oils raises your omega-6 to omega-3 fatty acid ratio in favor of omega-6 fatty acids. That ratio is key to human health, and it has health consequences when it gets skewed. 2, industrial seed oils are unstable and they oxidize very easily. 3, they contain harmful additives. 4, I do not think having high cholesterol is bad if you have low triglycerides, low C-reactive protein, if you're not insulin resistant, and you are not obese. So let's get into the omega-3 to omega-6 ratio. A lot of people have messaged me, younger kids and stuff, and they're like, hey, my mom, dad, they think seed oils are healthy. What can I do to convince them that they are not? I think the omega-3 to 6 ratio is the most scientifically sound way to attack seed oils and combat the prevalent seed oils that are everywhere. So for all of human history, until about 100 years ago, human beings have had an omega-3 to omega-6 ratio of 1 to 1. Some anthropologists out there think it was closer 2 to 1 in terms of omega-3 to omega-6 fatty acids. This is because omega-6 fatty acids are found in nuts, seeds. They're not found in high amounts in, animal protein. They're definitely, not found in high amounts in fish, which are really rich in omega-3. Obviously, animal protein, fish, they do have omega-6 fatty acids, but the ratio is very skewed omega-3 to omega-6. There are studies on this. There's anthropological and epidemiological studies at the molecular level that indicate human beings evolved with a ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 fatty acids of about 1 to 1. So this is well established. Today, after the introduction of seed oils, grains, nuts, seeds, all these type of things, omega-6 fatty acid, grain-fed cows, today most people are rocking a 1 to 20, and I've heard some people say possibly an even 1 to 40 omega-3 to omega-6 ratio. That's insane. We have skewed that ratio an immense amount. As someone with a degree in anthropology, I hear a lot of people say, oh, our ancestors, they didn't eat that much meat. It was really hard to come by. That's not necessarily true, and there's a lot of evidence on that. What I'll quickly say is, if you kill a bison, this is going to give you, maybe 1,000 pounds of butchered meat. We didn't live in very big tribes. If you had 100 people in your tribe, this would give 10 pounds for one kill per person. They also knew how to preserve that meat with smoke and salt. And so I think our ancestors were a little more creative than you might think. And while meat, yes, it was, difficult to come by. It was a process to get it. They weren't necessarily just like killing one rabbit and, starving on that. In some situations they were, but for the most part, they weren't. There's also pastoralism, where we would basically set up farms in a way. They would do, high fence operations. They would kind of capture, bison, goat, whatever it may be, and they would sort of have them at their disposal, so they weren't always doing very difficult hunts. So if you are eating industrial seed oils, you are going to be over the ratio of omega-6 to omega-3, over that 1-to-1 ratio in no time, because when we look at the omega-6 numbers, sunflower, this is per 100 grams per serving. Sunflower oil, 65.7 grams of omega-6 fatty acids per 100 grams. Cottonseed oil, 51.5. Soybean oil, 51. So on and so forth. I do not fear omega-6 fatty acids in terms of, I'm not scared of omega-6. There's omega-6 in meat and omega-6 in fish, and, I might even eat some nuts, and olive oil has omega-6. The thing I fear is having a really bad ratio of omega-3 to omega-6 fatty acids. And there's a great paper titled The Importance of the Ratio of Omega-6 to Omega-3 Essential Fatty Acids, and it discusses how conditions such as breast cancer, rectal cancer, cardiovascular conditions all decrease when that ratio of omega-3 to omega-6 is not so skewed. So this is very important for many different diseases. You want to have a good omega-3 to omega-6 ratio. This is very well established. I don't really see how any doctor could ever say that having a good ratio of omega-3 to omega-6 fatty acids is not good for human health, yet somehow they still oftentimes they recommend eating seed oils. I don't understand that. I saw a doctor say, you can eat seed oils. Yes, they're very rich in omega-6, but you can just take fish oil to balance it out. That doesn't seem like a good idea to me at all. I just choose to try to avoid seed oils. So now we get to oxidation. These seed oils are produced. They are put in plastic jugs. They sit on the shelf under light forever, a long time, and they oxidize quickly. So these are made up of polyunsaturated fatty acids, and these are more unstable, and they oxidize when they're exposed to heat, light, etc. So two harmful substances, trans fats and lipid peroxides, are created when they are exposed to heat and light. Trans fats are well known in their role for the development of cardiovascular disease and type 2 diabetes. I don't think anybody's saying trans fats are great. So for every 2% increase in calories from trans fat, your risk of heart disease is nearly doubled. So what do the producers of these seed oils do? They're in a difficult situation. They go, hey, we make these oils and they oxidize pretty quickly. They were having issues where people would buy canola oil, soybean oil, they'd open them and they would smell rancid because they'd be on the shelf for months, they would oxidize, and nobody wanted to use them. So what they did is they started to add these synthetic antioxidants like BHA, BHT, and TBHQ. while these sound good, an antioxidant, these are synthetic antioxidants, which probably have some very bad effects for your health. There's a study on TBHQ titled the NRF2 activator TBHQ exacerbates immediate hypersensitivity response to food allergens. The study is essentially saying that when you're exposed to TBHQ, you can have worse food allergies. So there's a lot of bad studies on these additives that they're adding there. And I mean, you got to just think of the whole process. They're producing these rancid oils, adding in, synthetic antioxidants so they don't smell rancid. They're bleaching them, they're deodorizing them, they're putting them in plastic, they're letting them sit on a shelf, and they're telling you this is what you want for heart health. And these have only been used really in the last 80, 90 years. How has our heart health been in the last 80, 90 years? It's gotten worse. And now we get into sort of the basis of the argument for seed oils is that seed oils reduce LDL, they reduce cholesterol. Cholesterol is bad. So when we eat these seed oils, we reduce cholesterol. When you eat coconut oil, butter, ghee, even olive oil, that's going to increase your cholesterol. So cholesterol is bad. It's clogging the arteries, right? We need to reduce it. So let's ingest seed oils. Doctors that aren't up on the research say low cholesterol is good, high cholesterol is bad. I'm going to do another episode fully about cholesterol, but let's get into it a little bit here. There's an entire book, a great book that I always recommend to people called The Great Cholesterol Myth by Dr. Bowden. And he, in this book, summarizes what him and many other cardiologists believe, which is a new theory of heart disease. What they're basically saying, what is kind of the new wave in cardiology, is that they're saying we should no longer fear cholesterol so much. And this has come out, even Harvard Health online, they say, don't throw away your egg yolks anymore. Don't fear dietary cholesterol. But the prevailing wisdom, so if you ask your parents or you ask somebody older, they're going to say cholesterol causes heart disease, even though that's sort of being dispelled right now, even in the top, very mainstream Western academic institutions. It's true that in later stage heart disease, LDL eventually does clog the endothelium, and LDL is at play later. But what causes LDL to get stuck there? Dr. Paul Saladino refers to this as loading the gun, which I'm going to talk about the factors that load the gun for LDL cholesterol to clog your arteries. And these factors, which are talked about in this book and by many cardiologists, are elevated triglyceride levels, elevated C-reactive protein, which is a good inflammatory biomarker, insulin resistance, and obesity. Basically, metabolic dysfunction, meaning you are unhealthy. So, inflammatory markers like C-reactive protein, oxidized LDL, and other metabolic markers, things like fasting insulin, fasting glucose, fasting leptin, your post-meal blood sugar, hemoglobin A1C. There's a variety of markers that you can get tested that actually give a picture of what's happening with your metabolic function. And again, from an anthropological point of view, this makes a lot of sense because there are tribes like the Inuit, the Maasai, and countless of other tribes. How we got here as human beings is eating animal protein, animal fat. We ate a pretty high-fat diet, one that a Western cardiologist would go, wow, that's really bad for your heart. And there's very little heart disease. There's other issues. If you got a cut, if you broke a bone, you might be in some, you might die. But today we have modern medicine, which I think is very good at that trauma care. But where we've gone completely astray is thinking that eating these higher fat, saturated fat, dietary cholesterol-rich foods is clogging our arteries, because that did not happen to our ancestors, and there simply wouldn't be a lot of these tribes around flourishing with good health and very, very, very low rates of heart disease that are eating this tremendous amount of fat. Why have those tribes eaten a lot of fat and get no heart disease? It is because you need this total picture of health. Your blood sugar, your oxidized LDL, your C-reactive protein. And this is also why there are millions of people every year who have extremely low cholesterol and get heart disease. So this kind of busts that LDL myth right out of the water. There are tons of studies in that book, The Great Cholesterol Myth, where people have low LDL, and they're a perfect picture of cholesterol in a Western doctor's mind. Great, your cholesterol's low. Boom, they get a heart attack. Why is that? It is because cholesterol in your blood is not a good indicator of are you going to get a heart attack or have heart disease. We were just wrong about cholesterol. It's okay. It's okay to be wrong. It was one of the first things we could measure in the blood, so they tried to draw connections in this rush to understand what was going on. And there is a connection oftentimes in late-stage heart disease with high cholesterol. However, I do not fear having high cholesterol because I have low C-reactive protein, low triglycerides, my blood sugar is stable and amazing, I'm not insulin resistant, I have a six-pack abs. I'm not obese. I do not feel like I need to lower my cholesterol to be healthy. Cholesterol is also very important. It's a substrate for our hormones. Your hormones are made from cholesterol. Your brain is made up of 60% fat, about 20% cholesterol. So the new picture of heart disease is what I've talked about, which is other biomarkers are way more important than your LDL and your cholesterol. And Dr. Paul Saladino goes so far as to say he kind of wants higher cholesterol. As long as those other markers are very low, cholesterol is great. So it's a total backwards flip, I think, where we need to go, because we're telling people to eat these seed oils, raise their omega-6 to omega-3 ratio for the worst, which we know leads to inflammation. We're not talking to people really about, blood sugar, insulin resistance, these type of things, but we're telling them eat seed oils because you want to lower your cholesterol. I think it's completely wrong. Do I completely avoid seed oils? No. I try to, but sometimes when you eat out at a restaurant or if I'm traveling, you've seen me, eat Chipotle and do my Chipotle order on Instagram or TikTok. That's made with rice bran oil, which is a seed oil. It is very difficult to completely avoid seed oils. And again, in very, very small amounts. Do I think it's going to be the end of your health if you eat a tiny bit of seed oils? No. I think that good omega-3 to omega-6 ratio is very important. I don't like some of the compounds that are in seed oils, but this is the modern world, and they're everywhere. So I try to avoid them. At home, I never have seed oils in my house at all. So I use ghee, beef tallow, butter, olive oil, and I think this is the big change for people. If you want to avoid seed oils, you have to learn how to cook and make food at home. So I truly believe this massive change that we've undergone in the last 80 years, maybe even less, maybe 60, 70 years, where most Americans went from consuming animal fats and other types of fat to consuming these massive amounts of oxidized, additive-filled omega-6 fatty acids as their main source of fat, has made us unhealthier. This is not a good change for the health of America. And today we have doctors saying, no, it is good because they lower cholesterol. Keep on eating seed oils. I don't think it's good. I think if we got back to using fats that we've been using up until 1940 in human history, we would be a much healthier society, and there'd be a lot of benefit to that. I can't tell you the amount of people that have removed seed oils from their diet or removed them 95%, and they feel amazing. They feel a lot better. So do your best. It is difficult to avoid seed oils. If you are young and maybe you're in college and you have to eat some, you're going to be fine. It's going to be okay. But I would not recommend using seed oils as your main source of fat at all, quite the opposite. So buy some ghee, buy some beef tallow, buy some olive oil even, some butter. Olive oil, by the way, is not a seed oil. Olive oil is a fruit. Olives are fruit. Avocado oil. Avocado is a fruit. Make sure you get high quality because a lot of those olive oils and avocado oils are cut with seed oils. The other thing that I'll mention before we get going is there's just an immense amount of profit here. You have to understand how cheap these seed oils are compared to animal fats. You have to learn to invest in your health. Yes, ghee, butter, beef tallow are more expensive than a giant tub of canola oil that's been sitting in plastic, leaching BPA into it. It's a whole another topic. So try to get some high quality fats and use those. And if your parents or someone in your family still thinks that seed oils are great for them, have them listen to this podcast, and hopefully they buy some olive oil and start using that instead. So that's it for this episode of Santa Cruz Medicinals Radio. Please subscribe, share with a friend, drop a YouTube comment or just DM me what do you want to see on the podcast. We're just going to be diving into these topics, ripping apart seed oils constantly, always, me. So thank you so much. That's it. And I'll check in with you guys next week.